and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video I would like to talk about Tomorrow by Together's Blue Hour, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of the Japanese video and what it can tell us about the storyline. Now, much like anticipated in my comeback theory about Blue Hour, this video continued to explore the dream concept by showing us a version of events that in many respects can be compared to what we already saw in the Korean version of Blue Hour. Much like in that video, the Japanese MV portrays the boys playing together as they escape in a collective fantasy that they created with their imagination. And even if this time around the location is more realistic than the others, the general message of the song is still conveyed by including fantastical elements that show us the magic that their friendship is able to create. You see, no matter what version we're talking about here, Blue Hour is a song that is essentially about the importance of friendship and imagination. This is a track that focuses on the last moments of childhood happiness that anticipate the boys' entrance into adulthood. But as we see in the video, Tomorrow by Together are not ready to let go just yet, because even if they know that the night is approaching, they also want to hold on to this Blue Hour because of the happiness that their friendship was able to create. Now, to a certain extent, this is a concept that in the past year has been approached in many different ways. If Kenshi Simi and Blue Hour already hinted at the idea that the boys are growing up and that their relationship is changing, both Puma and Eternally foreshadowed that soon enough things will take a darker turn and the boys will have to face a side of themselves that has been awakened by the choices that led to their separation. Now, even if in this Blue Hour we only see glimpses of this change, this idea is more relevant than ever, because what the realism of the video is telling us here is that we are far closer to adulthood than we are to the fantasy of their childhood. If we compare this video to Blue Hour or Blue Orangeade, for instance, the contrast is pretty evident. In the past, we saw the boys totally immersed in the dream that they created with their imagination, and the settings reflected this illusion by showing us games and adventures that were as far to reality as they could possibly be. But this time around, things are completely different. Even if the boys are still playing around and having fun, reality is so prevalent that even in the fantasy the setting is much more minimal than before. So if we look at this contrast and also consider the introduction of a theater stage, which is an element that largely implies make-believe, we can say that this Blue Hour is showing us the last glimpse of the dream that will disappear when the night comes along. Just because maturity is around the corner, however, this doesn't mean that this experience is any less magical, because as we see in the video, the game that they're playing soon takes a supernatural turn. Their friendship brings magic into their life, and fantasy and reality merge together because of it. So as we see the boys having fun, we also see their imagination taking over and the boys enjoying their time together as much as they can. Now, what's interesting about this sequence is that if we consider it in the context of the video as a whole, then we can say that this Blue Hour may actually be showing us a more condensed version of what we saw until now. Much like what we saw in Eternally, for instance, the video shows us that the first person to introduce the magic into the real world is none other than Subin, who activates the engines in the junkyard and literally brings the game to life. Even if Yuninkai is involved in the process, Subin is the one who pulls the levers and the one who pushes the button that sends Yeonjun flying in the sky. So if back in Eternally this concept was portrayed with Subin bringing the dice back to reality and effectively activating the magic that comes with it, in this Blue Hour we see a similar event but in a completely different way. Much like what we saw in Runaway, on the other hand, the video also tells us that once magic enters their life, it also takes a life of its own, because after Subin pushes the button, magic is out of their control and the boys themselves seem surprised by this unexpected turn of events. We see Yeonjun chilling in the clouds, teacups floating all around, and most of the characters enjoying the magic as it appears in front of their eyes, but the only person who actively uses magic is actually Beomgyu. Now, this scene here is actually interesting for a couple of reasons, because Beomgyu's ability to control the magic might actually suggest that he is the one who is the most immersed in the fantasy of their youth. Much like what we saw in both Blue Hour and Drama, for instance, Beomgyu is the character with the most vivid imagination, but also the one who is most attached to this fantasy because of the friendship that connects him to the people that he loves. So it makes sense that he's the one with the most control, because in comparison to the others, Beomgyu is far more attached to the fantasy than he is to reality. If back in Blue Hour he was the last one to live the dream, in drama he created a whole fantasy where he was the protagonist, even if in reality he was nothing more than an extra. And even if the situation has changed since then, the video might foreshadow that his mindset might not have changed after all. If drama marks the moment where the group meets again after childhood and Beomgyu is the odd one out, throughout the other videos we see that Beomgyu gradually makes his way into the group until he finally becomes an essential part of the team. Now in this Blue Hour we see that the video begins with Beomgyu front and center and leading the others towards the dream, and this tells us that over time things did indeed change because now he is completely included in the group. The fact that in the video is driving a UFO, however, could also foreshadow a sense of alienation here, because even if Beomgyu is not an actual alien, at the very least we saw that he is another. That is, a character that doesn't exactly fit in, but that uses fantasy to literally escape the reality that's in front of him. While in the video we see that Subin, Taeyeon and Hyunin Kai are more grounded in reality, Beomgyu literally flies away from it, but as it turns out he's not the only one, because Yeonjun is up in the sky as well. Now the fact that Yeonjun and Beomgyu are more lost in the fantasy than the others actually recalls what we saw back in Kenshi Simi, because in that video we saw that while the others were progressively becoming more and more upset, the two of them kept on playing without realizing that the dynamics of the group were actually changing. Much like what we saw in that video, even if the boys play together and have fun, Yeonjun and Beomgyu are the ones who take it to the next level, but when the night comes along, even they have to face reality. And if in the Korean version we saw Beomgyu's reaction to this change, in this Blue Hour we actually see Yeonjun's. After the sun goes down, Yeonjun has a vision of 5 wooden horses being replaced by a single white one, and these visuals not only foreshadow the passage between fantasy and reality, but also between childhood and adulthood, as well as unity and separation. If the 5 wooden horses represented the boys lost in the fantasy of their youth and the friendship that kept them united, after the sun goes down, the fantasy disappears only to be replaced by reality. You see, the white horse here is an animal that can symbolize both innocence and death, so in this case we can say that Yeonjun's vision is actually showing him the death of his innocence and his entrance into adulthood, which is a stage of his life that is both real and lonely. Before this change comes into play, however, the boys use their imagination to come together one last time, so with the plot twist of the century, the bushes come to life and dance with them to say goodbye to the fantasy of their youth. Now if you look closely, at this point Yeonjun actually changes the choreography, because instead of lifting his head like the others, this time around he actually places his hand over his heart. This might imply that even if things will be changing, the memory of their friendship will stay with them forever. And this idea is also conveyed by the scene of the carousel, where we see the boys running back to the ride and enjoying themselves without worrying about the future. You see, much like I said in my video about Blue Hour, the carousel is a symbol of youth and innocence that is also connected to the concepts of time and illusion. Since it's a circle, the carousel is a ride without a beginning nor an ending. It's like an eternal game, if you will. So the fact that the boys are running back to it implies that no matter how things will change, their imagination will always allow them to be together and be young forever. This, however, does not apply to reality, because right at the end, Taeyeon's vision actually shows us 2 ghosts backing away and the teacup falling to the ground as a symbol of the magic disappearing from his life. Now, back in my comeback theory, I actually said that the 2 ghosts could be none other than Yeonjun and Hyunin Kai, but in the video we see that all of them are dressed as ghosts, so as of right now we have no idea who the ghost might actually be. What I can tell you, however, is that by the looks of it, these visuals might actually be referencing Ghosting, which is a song where the boys are ghosted by the others and in turn feel like ghosts because of the ending of their friendship. The video here obviously foreshadows that this separation will focus on 2 members in particular, but since we have no idea who these people might be, for now we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!